Changing climate. Changing fauna. Changing social life. Changing financial circumstances. Changing values. Changing culture. Changing life.
The economy in North Dakota was flat. People were just getting by. But now, thanks to the discovery of oil, the town is now changing.
There's new homes, new businesses. It has been booming.
This has been a challenge and an opportunity, but still a challenge.
The mass shooting in California is being treated as an act of terror, with one of the attackers believed to have pledged allegiance to Islamic State. An investigation uncovers that ISIL is exploiting European charities to finance its terror. An international watchdog tracking terrorist finances tells us countries aren't freezing the jihadist group's funds fast enough. Also, the world's largest oil producers failed to agree on a production cap, sending oil prices down as divisions between OPEC members grow more apparent. Thanks for joining us this hour. My name's Neil Harvey and you're watching RT International. Now, the FBI is treating the massacre of 14 people in California by a married couple with assault rifles as an act of terrorism.
This is now a federal terrorism investigation led by the FBI. And the reason for that is that the investigation so far has developed indications of radicalization by the killers and of a potential inspiration by foreign terrorist organizations.
The FBI has reportedly established that one of the attackers communicated with extremists associated with the Shabab Islamist movement in Somalia, as well as with Al-Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda's wing in Syria, although that was several years ago. The FBI added that the killers are not considered to be part of a larger network. Two attackers were not on the police's radar before the deadly shooting. The couple was armed with assault rifles and handguns, and officers later found up to 2,000 bullets in their getaway car, which they'd rented several days earlier. The FBI concluded the killers had planned the attack in detail. RT's Gani Chichikan has more on the ongoing investigation.
Investigators are looking into possible accomplices. They say at least one of the shooters had phone connections with quote-unquote other subjects of FBI's investigation. Who are these other subjects? Not clear. We just know that no one has been arrested in connection with the massacre. The FBI said the couple had destroyed their cell phones, computers, and other electronics prior to the attack. Earlier, law enforcement sources told several news organizations here that the wife, Tashfeen Malik, pledged allegiance to ISIL in a Facebook post. The sources said the post appeared just before the attack. Later was apparently deleted. Officials are working to confirm whether this was indeed Malik who posted the message. The FBI said they're also reaching out to other countries to investigate the couple's connections abroad. 2 years ago, the male shooter, the husband, Saeed Farouk, traveled to Saudi Arabia. His wife, Malik, was a Pakistani native, a Pakistani citizen living in Saudi Arabia when she met Farouk. Farouk was a U.S. citizen, born in Chicago, Illinois, and raised in California. Malik entered the United States on a K-1 or fiancé visa last year. The FBI says they're trying to find out what motivated them to go kill so many innocent people, many of them the husband's co-workers. What authorities do know is that the attack was clearly planned well in advance. Police found a makeshift bomb lab at the shooter's home. The bomb they planted, as we know, did not explode. This suggests that there could have been many more victims in this massacre. Experts are pointing out some similarities with the Paris attacks on November 13th. You have multiple shooters, a bomb, which in this case, thank God, did not go off. Authorities are careful when speaking about a possible connection with ISIL because they know a terrorist organization like that would like to get their name attached to an attack like this.
Prior to heading to the killing, the two left their 6-month-old daughter with their grandmother. And after the search of their home, an extensive arsenal of more than 4,000 rounds of ammunition, homemade pipe bombs and materials for making weapons was discovered. Middle East analyst Nada Hashimi says that there are many in the US who could come under the influence of Islamic State.
There's a certain set of individuals that are, susceptible to this type of radicalization, and they exist. ISIS is deliberately encouraging its sympathizers to stage these types of attacks. There's a lot of people, unfortunately, here in the United States, Muslim and non-Muslim, who suffer from mental health issues. Unfortunately, in this country, you can have easy access to an arsenal of weapons. You can purchase them legally, and nobody is willing to do anything about it, no senior politician, because of the stranglehold that private lobby groups have on politicians here, and I'm speaking about the NRA. So I think we're going to see more of this.
Well, in the aftermath of the Paris atrocities, ISIL has been threatening attacks on US soil. And just last week, President Obama tried to reassure the American public that their country was safe from terrorism. Journalists have been left wondering, though, why the US administration was reluctant to call this latest attack an act of terror.
Right now, we know of no specific and credible intelligence indicating a plot on the homeland. And that is based on the latest information I just received in the Situation Room.
We're seeing a situation right now that, for all intents and purposes, appears to be an act of terrorism, where the administration is reluctant, seemingly, to say so. And then, of course, there's the question about whether or not the president should properly be making reference to Islamic jihadism or radical Islamist terrorism, as opposed to just violent extremism. These are questions that go, as you know, to the rhetorical function of the presidency. And so I just ask you, does this president have a problem with his rhetoric where terrorism is concerned?
Well, maybe in the mind of his critics, but he certainly doesn't when it comes to his resolve in confronting terrorism and keeping the country safe.
We heard earlier from the Director of Terrorism Research at basicsproject.org, who explained why the authorities didn't want to refer to the killings as terrorism from the start.
The current administration in place in the United States is not want to say the words Islamist terrorism, anything related with a violent act that could point back to the Middle East. Quite frankly, it's frustrating for many people who walk around the world with eyes wide open that they aren't more forthcoming with what we believe to be common sense. So this is a political motivation. It is absolutely something that is meant to bolster the narrative that this administration has been putting forth since the 2012 election, that terrorism is on the run. I think we understand that it's not.
ISIL is using people's sense of compassion to fund its terrorism. Italy has uncovered an unexpected source of the jihadist group's financing, a charity organisation aimed at helping Syrian children. The Financial Action Task Force, an international watchdog set up to track the trails of terror cash, has confirmed the story.
The case study was provided by the Italian government, who are an active contributor, one of the original members of the Financial Action Task Force. So they provided us with that information. And it really shows and demonstrates how non-profit organisations, charitable organisations, can be vulnerable, wittingly or unwittingly, more often, to terrorist financing.
And here is how this particular scheme worked. Thousands of individual donors and businesses from right across Europe sent cash to the charity's Italian bank account. The money was then transferred to Turkey, where it was withdrawn by the charity. But among the donors was a terrorist who used the non-profit organisation as an unwitting conduit for ISIL funds. Well, Islamic State's exploiting people's generosity for financing might be the latest scheme to grab media headlines, but it is by no means the biggest earner for the terrorists. Islamic State makes millions of dollars a day from smuggling oil and artifacts, as well as ransoms from hostages and extortion. All of this makes ISIL the richest terrorist organisation in the world. David Lewis, Executive Secretary of the Financial Action Task Force, thinks that countries aren't doing enough to close off the flow of funds.
Many countries are not implementing the measures, so they might have passed legislations, they might have established institutions and financial intelligence units to investigate and to tackle these threats, but they're not implementing those measures effectively. In particular, in relation to freezing terrorist assets, we found that 2/3 of countries have yet to freeze the assets of terrorists designated by the United Nations. And those countries that do freeze those assets do it much too slowly. In order for it to be effective, those measures need to be put in place by countries within hours. And what we found is that in most cases it takes anywhere between 2 days to 1 month before countries act to implement those measures, by which time the assets could have disappeared and we've lost them.
Iraqi authorities are demanding that Turkish troops withdraw from positions near the city of Mosul. Their presence there has been described as a serious breach of Iraqi sovereignty by Iraq's Prime Minister. About 150 Turkish soldiers have been deployed there to train Iraqi Kurdish forces to fight ISIL. Now, this stands in contrast to September, when Turkish warplanes launched a wave of airstrikes against the Kurds in northern Iraq. Oil prices took a slide this Friday and are now hovering close to a 6-year low. That's after OPEC, a group of the world's biggest crude exporters, failed to agree on production caps. The 6-hour meeting was reportedly marked by rumblings between the cartel members as they called for production to be cut. RT's Daniel Bushell has the details.
Before these talks, Iran sent OPEC a leaked letter demanding to cut production, which OPEC flat out refused. But at Friday's summit, the world's biggest oil group made a huge effort to look united. When I asked the Saudi oil minister about blocking Tehran's demand, he officially denied any rift at all. His Iraqi counterpart simply dodged the question.
Some disagreements between Iran, Iraq and Saudi Arabia on the other side within OPEC. Some disagreements.
Why do you need that?
Because everyone wants to know. Kuwait's minister was more forthcoming, admitting to us